All right, good afternoon, everyone. We'll call to order the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals regular meeting for May 24th, 2017. I will mention there is a change to our agenda today. There's an application Z17035 that was the last one that has been withdrawn. So I'll mention that to anybody that's here that was there for that application. First item on our agenda is a consideration of the minutes for the regular meeting from April 26, 2017. Those minutes have been provided. Are there any changes necessary to those?
None noted.
If not, those will stand as approved. The next item on our agenda is an item that was deferred from the April meeting. It's application Z17018 by David Branch, requesting a 4-foot variance from the zoning ordinance from the minimum side setback of 12.5 feet to allow the structure no closer than 8.5 feet from the side property line. This property is in a single-family residential RS-15 zone located at 506 Woodmore Drive. Ms. Rush, if you'd review that for us.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Young, Commissioners. This property is zoned RS-15, which is a single-family residential zoning district, which has a side yard setback of 12.5 feet. The applicant, Mr. David Branch, is wishing a variance of 3 feet, which is a rounding up. This is typically what we do, but the actual location is 2 feet 3 3/8 inches from our zoning ordinance, Chart 2, for an addition that was already constructed. The addition is currently 6.5 feet from the property line, and the applicant is requesting to reconstruct the exterior wall, moving it back 42 inches. This variance request is because a covered porch is allowed by the Murfreesboro zoning ordinance to extend into a required side yard setback. The reason for this variance is that the applicant had constructed this addition with permits, and it was later found that it was into the setback and was not allowed to be into the setback. The Board of Zoning Appeals on January 25th, 2017 had denied the initial request for the variance because the variance was due to the actions of the applicant's own making. The applicant subsequently submitted a new variance application to try to retain the roof structure that's still there in order to minimize the amount of cost for the reconstruction of the unit itself. And by having the covered porch, it would allow the roof structure to remain, but lessen the amount of the variance. It was a new variance application for that reason. So the original request was for 7 feet. This current request then is for 3 feet. We have a photograph here of the structure itself in this location. And then if you change to the next one, this is then the aerial and side elevation of what is being requested. At the hearing last month, the applicant was instructed to provide improved drawings to more clear show the porch, the projection, and exactly where the variance is, and this is the drawing that was submitted. And this was the surveyed map that was created as well. So to summarize, again, the request is for a 3-foot variance and to allow the roof structure to remain in place, creating a covered porch. Variances, as per our zoning code, require the board to make specific findings and determine whether or not it was of their own making. Is there something unusual or unique specific to this parcel that restricts or limits how it can be developed, and situations that would be very unique to this property? So the board has to make those findings, and you do have a list of that information for you. The applicant is here. I don't know if you want to answer any questions. The last hearing, the public hearing portion was closed. So if you do want to take comments again today, you would need to reopen the public hearing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions for staff at this point? All right, Mr. Branch, anything you'd like to add to this for the application?
Yes, sir. Again, David Branch, 506 Woodmore. Thank you for your time this afternoon. As stated before, it's 2 feet and 3/8 inches on the front side, and then due to the odd shape of the lot as it goes back, because the house wasn't set perpendicular to that property line, it's actually 3.5-inch variance in the back that I'm requesting to put me within that. Again, thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay. At this time, we'll, is there any question, Mr. Branch?
No.
At this time, we'll open the public hearing. If there's anyone present wishing to speak for or against, please come forth and state your name and address for us for this application and other public hearings.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Beth Hagan. I represent Marcia Smith and Mr. Martin, and they're the immediate neighbors to this property on the side of the house where the non-conforming structure is. So that's 510 Woodmore Drive. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak about this again. I know that you all have heard from Ms. Smith and Mr. Martin in the past. Ms. Smith's not here with us today. Mr. Martin's here if you had any particular questions for him. But we know that you all are looking to apply the zoning law. And so when we look at the standard, there has to be some basis in this parcel of property that would make it extraordinarily difficult for him to comply with the zoning laws. And respectfully, the standard can't be met in this scenario. So we're asking you to please deny this variance. It essentially is the same that came before this board in the past and that you have denied, in that the closet is still built within the setback area. Mr. Branch was told in 2013, 2014, at least 2 times by Ms. Smith early in the construction that he was building within the setback. And it was his choice not to stop at that point and try to get more information. There are citizens all over our city who at that point would stop and have a surveyor show 2 points in the line so it could be clarified, and Mr. Branch chose not to do that. And so for that reason, there's not anything that is extraordinary about the parcel of land, because in fact when he did get a survey from Huddleston Steel, they found the points and they showed very clearly that he was building into the setback. There's a lot of curious things about this, and just in terms of a pattern of doing something that doesn't meet our laws for construction and zoning purposes because you're not going to get caught maybe. The permit asked for 84 square feet of an addition. He's presented to the board that he built 135 square feet on this addition. He's occupying the space now. There's no C of O. The permit itself he pulled and signed where it said that he understood that he was not to occupy the space, and it is handwritten that the construction's conditioned on him meeting the 12.5-foot setback. Respectfully, he was on notice, and so we're asking for you to find that. I don't think that you can find any facts. I haven't heard any facts or seen anything within his application that would show that this parcel of property somehow makes it him unable to have the addition anywhere else. He has a backyard where he could build the structure and be in compliance with the setback. Now he's saying that he wants to add a porch and put a door there, and the door is right where his fence intersects. We're just asking you to call this what it is. It's a closet. That's what he's repeatedly asked for. That's what he built. And a porch would require some sort of entrance. This isn't an entrance. It's on the complete opposite side of his house from the driveway. So respectfully asking you to deny the variance. Ms. Smith and Mr. Martin value the green space that the setback affords them, and they're just asking for the laws for variance and zoning to be complied with. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else present wishing to speak to this application? Sure.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Betty Higgins, and I live in Murfreesboro. I'm Miss Smith's sister and am blessed to see her and Mr. Martin often at their home. They lived at 510 Woodmore Drive for 7 years before purchasing the property in 2015, after being in discussions with the owner since 2013. During the years they leased the property, they came to love the house and valued the stability and safety of the Bellwood neighborhood. The owner wasn't planning to sell, but finally was convinced to do so because of their care for the lawn and the house and their genuine appreciation of the property, which had originally belonged to the owner's grandmother. In deciding to build the addition to his house without benefit of a proper survey, Mr. Branch has encroached on their property and has taken something that is rightfully theirs. I ask that you please not condone his clearly intentional and unapologetic disregard for the city's housing codes and restrictions and violations of their rights. This has also cost my sister and Mr. Martin a tremendous amount of time, as they have had to spend many hours since last August in follow-up with the city. Their time and efforts have been meticulously documented by emails and phone records kept by my sister, who manages records for their businesses. They have lost work hours and now attorney's fees. I ask this board to respect Ms. Smith and Mr. Martin's property rights and deny any variance requested. Thank you.
Ma'am, is it okay if I get your address for the record?
2209 River Rock Crossing.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Anyone else present wishing to speak for this application? If not, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion or motion.
Mr. Branch, I appreciate the fact that you come back before us and try to come up with a compromise. I've put a lot of thought into this. I mean, it's been before us now 3 times, if I'm not mistaken. And it's just hard for me to come up with the fact that since we were made aware of the issue on the front end and we didn't take action on it, that I'm not sure how we can approve, or how I can vote to approve this application. So I'm going to vote no, but I wanted to let you know up front.
I would concur with Mr. Halliburton, and in looking at the standards, the very first thing that leaps out is about being self-created, and I think in view of even Mr. Branch's prior comments on it, it was self-created. Had he done the prudent thing to get a survey done before he started any construction. So I will vote no as well.
I would echo Mr. Halliburton and Mr. Tipp's comments, and that it was preventable. It's unfortunate, but I believe it was preventable, and doesn't really fit our definition of the standards to be able to approve the variance. So
If there are no other comments, I'll make a motion that we deny this request.
Second.
have a motion and a second to deny. Is there any further discussion on that? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that application's been denied. Next, we'll move to new business. First item is a sign variance request. It's application S17031 by Huddleston Steel Engineering, representing Tiffany Langford. They're requesting a sign variance from section 15 1/4, 26C 65216, tenant signage for minor tenants of the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance, which allows multi-tenant buildings with separate outside entrances, one tenant sign, to allow installation of two separate signs. This is for property in a planned unit development district located at 804 North Thompson Lane. If staff would review that for us.
Mr. Chairman, board members, thank you. The applicant, Mr. Clyde Roundtree, has submitted an application for a variance to the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance. As you said, the property is located at 804 North Thompson Lane, which is also known as the Gateway Village. It backs up to the parking lot of the hospital. It's a Swanson development, if that helps you any. The applicant is requesting a variance to allow 2 signs on the same elevation. The tenant is in a multi-tenant building, each having its own entrance. Each tenant having its own entrance. The lease space is about 2,300 square feet with just one exterior wall. In other words, they're not an end unit, they're not an end-capped unit, they're surrounded by tenants really on all 3 sides. The sign ordinance only allows 1 attached sign per elevation, and they're obviously requesting 2 signs. If we have some attachments, I think, that were supposed to be on the screen, besides my pretty face.
Can you show the screen, please?
Here we go. They're not real clear. If you look under where the letter A is, on the right of that picture, you'll see arched windows, and to the left of those, you'll see some square windows. If you'll notice, there's some color variations in the brick. Well, where the 2 colors meet, there's a 1-foot offset, if you will, in the front elevation. And that's what the applicant is claiming is their hardship. The elevation to the right of that is what they're proposing to do. And if we go to the next slide, it shows an even better picture where the offset is in the exterior wall and the signs they are proposing. When we measure the area of the sign, we draw a rectangle around it and multiply the length times the height, and that's the area of the sign. If you want to spread 2 signs apart, if you will, you can, and basically you come up with 2 signs, but we still have to make 1 rectangle box around it. Based on their tenant frontage, they're allowed a 72 square foot sign. With the proposal they have, they're actually up to 129 square feet, so they're over their allowable sign area. If we can go to the next slide, this is what they originally proposed, in which we actually approved. By sliding to the names together and drawing 1 box around them, they're under their allowable sign area. But they have, once we approved this, they came back later with a proposal of spreading them apart, increasing their sign area. So they're actually over, the proposal they want is over their allowable sign area. The other way of looking at it is they're wanting 2 signs on the same elevation. I hope that's clear. Obviously, this is coming out of the sign ordinance. I'd like to draw to your attention some of the standards for a variance, if you don't mind. One of them is the conditions upon which the petition for a variance is based would not be applicable generally to other property within the same district. We presently have another tenant in that same complex, although they do not have an offset in their building, are wanting to put up 2 signs. We have denied them. We don't know if they're going to come in for a similar variance. If the condition complained of by the appellant is of a general or widespread condition, then a variance should not be permissible. So it's not uncommon for buildings in the gateway to have these offsets. We deal with it quite often. We've always told people you got to push your signs together to get 1 sign area. So this is not an uncommon request. But again, it is in violation of the sign ordinance. The alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having interest in the property after the effective date of this chapter. The building's been there for a number of years. They have just recently moved in the past 6-7 months, I believe. So the offset was there. They should have common knowledge of it. So we're recommending that the variance be denied because we get so many requests for this. We feel that we might have other people coming back trying to get a variance for it.
So
You have any questions?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
These are 2 separate, could be set up as 2 separate stores, 2 separate owners, 2 separate businesses.
If they wanted to, yes. They actually rented 2 tenant spaces, but there is no interior wall separating the spaces. They tore that wall down. They got 1 bathroom
the current owner took the wall out of the middle. So if the wall was there and it was set up as two separate entities, then I guess letter C would be permissible. You wouldn't have the box around it, and the size of the signs would be okay.
If they met our definition of one tenant each having their own bathrooms, each having their own entrances and exits, we could look at them as two separate tenants and allow one sign per. But it's just a wide open store is what it is.
Is there an entrance at the boutique area or no?
There's two entrances,
There
yes.
is?
Yes. They were there when the building was originally built.
Right.
I think the original plans, which is very common, is that was to be two small tenant spaces.
The Bella Optical business on the other side of the, when I was driving by and tried to glance at the storefronts, I don't know, were they a double size? Were they larger than, it seemed like their business is bigger than, say, the Tiffany Lane side, too.
I think they were, yeah.
So it fit the 74, 75 feet, whatever the number was.
The 70,
Right?
I'm sorry, what?
Because it's not as long.
Yeah.
Right, it's 75.
Pretty good size sign, but it's
Yeah.
and over more than one unit.
If this space was, the square footage of the sign is based on 1.5 square feet for tenant frontage. They could go up to 75 square feet if they had a bigger space. But based on the dimension of the front of their tenant space, they're only allowed 72 square feet.
Okay. Anybody else have questions?
What was the reason for not wanting it together?
There's an well, they might be able to explain that better than me. My understanding is there's an offset in the front wall, which is, I guess, not giving them the look they're looking for. But I'd rather them explain that side of it. I'm just trying to explain what the ordinance says and why we think it shouldn't be passed.
Just to be clear, though, according to the zoning ordinance, each unit would have to have an entrance, and each unit would have to have a bath. Is that a restroom? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, each tenant's allowed its own one attached sign, no more than one attached sign. So
Right.
If we could look at each space as being a tenant, separate tenant, then yes. And typically we're looking for a wall that separates them. We're looking for a bathroom in each tenant space. We're looking for egress out of each tenant space. But if they were each separate tenants, then we would allow each.
Well, aside from a wall, which we know is not there, each unit has an entrance.
Yes.
One unit has restroom facilities.
Yes.
Does the other unit have at least rough-in plumbing?
I'm not sure. But the other issue would be there's only one exit out the back. So I don't know if it was closed up or not planned for. So.
Which would be another requirement, is what you're saying, right?
To be a tenant, each tenant would have to have its own
Okay.
egress. Now, it is possible, had they put an interior wall in there separating them, once a tenant space gets small enough, only one exit is required.
I see.
But since it's two tenant spaces, it's gone over that allowable square footage, has to have two exits. And those exits have to be 1/3 the diagonal of the space apart. It gets a little complicated. So.
Any further questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Langford, or anybody with the applicant like to add some comments to this?
Oh, let's see.
Chairman Young, board members, my name is Clyde Round with Hudson Steel Engineering, and I'm representing Mr. Langford in this particular situation. And this one kind of comes across more as a little bit more on the logical side. We're kind of wrestling because there's the hardship is to offset in the building. If you center mount the sign, the sign basically has to cantilever basically out. It kind of be extruded out off the building. And that kind of does two different things. Structurally, it makes it a little bit more of a difficult situation, which makes, whether it's a health, safety, welfare issue, I don't know if you want to stretch it that far, as much as it makes it a little bit more tentative because it's not wall mounted, it's actually bracketed. And secondly, just because the Gateway Village has such an upscale kind of feel, it just doesn't, we're concerned it's not going to look very good as far as just having a sign projecting past a foot off the building and have some tie rods back. But the other thing unique to this particular piece of property is that the brick's different color as well. So it really does look like two separate businesses. And that's what they're wrestling with is they purchased, this is not a lease situation, they own this piece of property, they bought that piece of property. And they bought it, where they bought it on Medical Center Boulevard because they wanted to have that exposure and make sure it was really a high-profile piece of property. And so what they've run into, and they're also told that they had to do the two entrances. They wanted to have one entrance, which would make the sign more logical because it would be over their main entrance, but they have to have two. So they've run into some kind of unique situations on this particular piece of property, especially when it comes to mounting the sign. The goal is not to go over the allotted square footage. That's really not their objective. They would like to just be able to define what they own. So when people go by, it's not confusing. As you can see the sign right now, they have basically a vinyl sign that kind of wraps between the two buildings. And it gets the point across that they own both units. But we feel like if we can figure out a way to put the boutique on the one side and the Tiffany Lane on the other, it really kind of compensates for the amount of frontage they have. And the other thing, we looked through a study to try to justify it. We justified it to the left, and say let's just put Tiffany Lane boutique on one side, and then all of a sudden the building becomes very blank. It almost looks like a storefront that's not being used. So I feel like if we can come to concessions on having the two, I think it makes it a stronger presentation from the road. I don't think it's obnoxious looking at all, and I think it also helps it look like the Gateway Village has more occupancy. So that's really our logic. He is here. Mr. Langford's here if you have any specific questions to him. And the other thing we did want to say, and it brought to your point, Mr. Tips, is that if they ever did decide to subdivide the unit, and just lease one portion, the business was scaled back or they went, a different direction, they'd want to have the option to put a sign up there for that tenant if they had to sublease it or something like that. So I feel like if it weren't for the fact that there was no partition wall in the building, we'd have two signs and it wouldn't be an issue. So that's our side of the story. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Honestly, I thought it was two stores when I looked at this picture that you are proposing.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it's confusing to me in any way. I don't understand why you can't just put it over the main entrance and have window stickers on the remainder. I guess why? How is this different than other places? I mean, there's several other places in the community that are similar to this.
Well, I think the offset creates a hardship for the sign to be centered. I think the fact that the offset creates two different kind of brick facades, it just looks like it's two different businesses, and their hope is to kind of make it look like one. And the two signs would afford them that opportunity.
Any more questions for Mr. Roundtree? I thought his wheels were spinning.
Well, I got two questions. Somebody asked, I don't know if it was Tim or whoever, is this other unit stubbed out for a bathroom?
Plumbing.
No, it's not.
Okay.
No, we bought the space and it was totally blank. So we had contractors come in and actually hook up to sewer, and they just did the one. Now, it could easily be stubbed because they actually ran over, there's Johnson Audiology next to us. So that comes through our space. So if we had to stub out a second.
If you wouldn't mind coming to the podium.
Okay,
sorry about that. Make sure we get your comments on the record.
My name is Shane Langford. My wife and I own Tiffany Lane together. But it would be easy to stub out for a second because their Johnson Audiology's stub out runs through our space. So it comes across our entire space. So if we ever had to do that, it wouldn't be hard to do at all. And just one other comment. We initially, when we did our building permit, we worked with Dow Smith Contracting Company to do our build out. The initial way we wanted it was one entrance. And kind of midway through the project, we realized we ran into some issues with getting everything approved because of if we were only going to have one entrance, we had to leave our back entrance more accessible for people to egress out through, and we use that area as storage. So the compromise or whatever had to happen was that we now had two entrances. Our initial goal was to have one entrance on the right side with the sign that fits in the square footage allowance, and then once we had to separate them, we've actually worked with 3 separate sign companies in town, and every sign company has told us this is not going to look good. We do offset, the brackets or whatever. We don't recommend doing that. So having 3 companies that have told us this is not a good idea to do this in the middle, and it's not going to look good, and that kind of got our wheels spinning of wanting to separate them. Again, we're not out for any extra square footage or anything like that. We just want them separate to define each of our entrances. We don't, someone I think suggested in some of our discussions, could you not use one entrance and have a main entrance? We don't want to do that. We want people, my wife's big thing is she doesn't want anybody to pull on a locked door, So we leave both open all day that we're open, and we'd like to just define those spaces if we could.
Just so I understand, when you're talking about these brackets, because that's what was my wheels were turning, that you could push this sign out if the inset's, let's say it's 24 inches, I don't know what it is.
It's 12 inches.
Okay, there you
yes.
go. So you're, just have an extra foot where or a foot and a half, whatever it would take to make it even across this offset. That's what you're saying that these sign companies are saying that would look awkward. Is that what you're, even
correct?
That might be even, it's just the brackets somehow make it look awkward.
Correct.
I would agree with that.
And we know when I met with Amelia, it's 18-inch allowable. You can be 18 inches off the building total. So we wouldn't exceed that if we did the center sign, but we would have at least a 12-inch bracket.
Right.
Where if you were at the space or walking around Gateway Village, you're going to see something sticking out to cover that gap or knockout, whatever you want to call it.
Definitely looks like 2 different stores.
Yeah.
The difference of the building and the way they're set up.
I got, I guess, maybe a question for you, but also for our planners. Mm-hmm. Dealing with the canopies, what about signage on the canopies as opposed to the building itself? Has that been explored?
We have not explored that. We're after a lighted presence. Right now we have a temporary, so we would prefer a lighted sign solution that defines both entrances.
So what about what regulations on having canopies or that are the signage on canopies and
It's a possibility. It would just be counted towards their 75 square foot allowable attached signage. They have and we've met with them several times. They're good people. I hope their business is successful. I really do. We've made some obvious suggestions to them where they maybe push the sign over to one side or the other. I'm not sure where the confusion comes in with us requiring 2 front doors. As I said earlier, it is big enough to require 2 exits. We recommended that they put striping and whatnot through the stock room, which the code will allow for them to exit out. The plans, I haven't actually been inside the tenant space. The plans show them doing that. So the front door, one of the front doors, in my opinion, could be eliminated if they wanted to. But if they want both, that's fine. More exits, the safer the building is.
Yeah.
But we've asked them to maybe move it to one side, then they could use window signage on the other door, or both doors if they wanted to let people know you can come in both doors. And there is the possibility of putting trim around the one sign that sticks out 1 foot. metal trim around it so you could not see the anchors behind the sign. So we feel there's several options to resolve it, even reducing the size of the sign and maybe pushing it together a little bit more. Might get it under the 75 square feet. But,
You say you felt like this situation may present itself in some other areas than this?
It has already. Now, they haven't actually asked for a variance. But we've had other people in the past. I'm not sure if it is center or not, but where there's offsets in the building, they don't know how to deal with it. But usually we'll work it out with them putting it on one side or the other.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant at this point? If not, we'll conduct a public hearing. Is there anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application? Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion or a motion.
Well, I'll be willing to discuss. I can understand, and I see, from aesthetics, I can see having these other anchors and all, and having that set back wouldn't be attractive to me. And I can also see the fact that, it's 2 units. You can say it's not, but everything else, it would be 2 units. If I were, on both, you would be at the liberty to do some modest finishing out, and you've got 2 units, So, you apply that, and it's, well, why couldn't you have 2 signs? Why couldn't you have the one over the larger unit and then have a second sign over the unit? If you were leasing it out, that's what you'd have.
I don't think that,
So-
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the word is tenant, not unit. And that's different. A unit is a space. A tenant is an owner. And so if it's one tenant is the rule,
Yeah.
then
I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying, it's the design.
or two.
It's designed to be 2 units, really.
Here's my question. There's a space on the square that I shopped at. It's been a few years, but I shopped in the past, and there's 2 different signs in the front, which made me think that there were 2 different stores. But when I went into the store, there was a door connecting the 2 shops inside the building. And is that one tenant or is that 2 tenants?
It would be one, because they get 3 square foot per linear foot of building frontage there, and those signs would have been measured as 1 sign.
So those would have been, even though, because of the space in that situation, it would be measured the same as this.
It would. The distance between
the
it would be
distance-
taken into account. What hurts them on the signage that they're asking for is the big blank space in between the 2. That's where a lot of their overall signage problems come in. If you took each individual sign separately, I believe it would come up to like 70 square feet as individual signs. But it's the interior, the center points of that causes the distance of the sign to be so long.
Okay, maybe I don't understand all of this. So what they're looking for is 1 sign that's spanning
One tenant.
that whole,
If
those,
you had
those 2 units.
When you have a separate outside entrance tenant, they can have 1 sign on their space, unless they are a corner tenant or an end cap tenant. Then they can have 2 signs. But when you are a single tenant in a space, you get one sign. So the sign ordinance gives the allowance in there that if you want two signs, you can have it. You just have to be able to draw a box around the whole area and call it one sign.
Okay. Thank you.
And they could, and I'm not advocating one way or the other, I'm just talking out loud, could accomplish that if they push these things closer together. But if I'm the business owner, I'm looking at this, and that's going to look a little awkward just about the way it sits over the windows. Right, wrong, or indifferent.
Right. I mean, you can define one entrance,
Yeah.
and that's what most of the tenants would do. They define one entrance, and then they would use other means of advertising that, they've got other stuff in there.
You like to say something else? Sure.
And I think there's plenty of justification in both directions. My concern is really the profile of this particular building, and that I think it's kind of a gateway standard in terms of it's one of our premier buildings, and I think as we pull it towards the center, what you run into is you get the offset becomes more accentuated. Like if you had one on one plane, one on the other plane, I think it would look curious. And if it wasn't on such a high-profile situation, I don't think it would be as concerned. But it's really kind of projecting out to our image as a city, and that's where I feel like if he has to kind of not jimmy rig it, but has to do this kind of cantilever deal, I feel like it's going to look really curious, if not bad. And that's unique to. I think there's plenty of circumstances what we found out in this city where there's all kinds of issues related to signs. This one, because of them making the investment on that front of that building, and because it's seen by so many people, I think if we do something that doesn't look really good, I think we're risking something as far as the quality of the Gateway Village. And so I think what they're proposing looks really good, and I think it's a flush-mounted scenario. It's a backlit scenario. And so that's where I feel like that's why I encouraged them to go through this process, because I felt like because of the profile of the situation that I think there is probably a more appropriate decision than not. And so, with that in mind, that's what we're asking for. That's part of our unique situation, not only the offset, but the fact that it's in a high-profile position, and really, as they justified, like I said, if we justified it to the left over that one entrance, if that was considered the main entrance, then that whole facade goes blank. I mean, you can put your window signage and try to pull that off, but if you know that building, there's a pretty good hedge in front of that. There's a lot of landscaping that's required in that particular area. I mean, Mr. Swanson had us remove some landscaping. He said, "Can you guys trim this up, so more people can see?" Some of the tenants complain just even about the amount of landscaping. But the profile you get on that sign from the road, those pictures are taken from the parking lot, so it's right there. But if you were to go from the road, you really do project up. So any mileage they might get out of door signage, window signage, sale signage in the window, you probably wouldn't get it from the street just based on how the sight lines work. Thanks.
I don't know enough about this to even be talking about it, but I think you could gain what you're trying to accomplish in this D. And hear me out. In the D scenario, granted, I get the fact that you've got a blank wall, for that next unit. But my argument would be, if you want it to be seen from the road, you get kind of the full effect by having it as D. If I'm walking along, I don't know if I'm going to be looking at the sign. I'm going to be looking at the door that says this is Tiffany Lane Boutique. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be looking up at the sign. So to me, you can gain what you're looking for in D, and then you put your window signage at eye level for people to know that you're coming into the store.
Yeah, I think everything Ken's really from the street. Their primary concern is making sure it has as much presentation, hence the backlighting, that you can see it from the road.
Okay.
Pedestrian-wise, you're right up against the building whenever you walk, and even the awnings, like that one picture, you can see how the awnings almost screen your view of the sign.
Right.
Yeah, it's all from the street.
I guess my thoughts. I can see both sides of this, but when I've got one, I guess the one that you presented. There's two pretty distinct brick colors and different units, so we are kind of getting to make them one unit is it's a unique situation for sure. I'm kind of leaning against a variance myself. I think there's some other options that would. This is going to look unique probably either way it goes, in my opinion. But in looking at it, I think I'm kind of leaning against a variance and try to fit it into what the regulations allow. I think that it's going to be some compromises any which way it goes. But that's kind of my thoughts.
I hate to seem so daft about this a little bit, but back to you all again. Is it the overall square footage that's exceeding why there's a variance? Because we're saying it's got to be boxed in? Is there a prohibition if they had like the picture, and I don't know what exhibit this is, but the picture where their wants are, you've got a backless sign, and they're Tiffany Lane on what I'm calling one unit because it's got different brick, it's got its own interest versus, and then boutique on the other unit. We're saying is it because we got to treat that as a box from all the way across that is why it goes beyond why a variance is required?
Let me see if I can try to explain it this way. And we've all agreed that one sign is allowed. If they want to, you can look at the sign ordinance allowing them to put two signs up there if they choose. The problem is the way the sign ordinance says, and our sign ordinance is written like most other municipalities. It's nothing unique to Murfreesboro. Our ordinance would say draw one block around both those signs. That way we're still counting it as one sign and calculate that area and whatever, they cannot be over 72 square feet.
72 square feet.
Yeah. So you could say, yeah, we're going to give them two signs. It's just how we calculate the area is counting it as one sign. Does that help you any?
It helps, yeah.
Okay.
And we are only to consider, I'm going to play devil's advocate. We are only to consider this this box because we are saying we can only allow one sign, or the devil's advocate part is, or as a board, can we consider this allowing two signs?
You could. The problem is you still just got to draw one block. And this is all in the ordinance. This isn't something we're making up as we go. There's examples in the ordinance about how to calculate the sign area, even when they spread them apart like this.
Okay.
And if they're allowed one attached sign, then we draw one box around that whole sign.
And to Ken's point, I don't know if we're on the same thought here, but when we look at peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties, again, you've got a design with a 1 foot offset. You got discoloration, different color brick. It has all of those qualities other than.
But this is a sign variance. It's not a variance. We have different things we have to show. They have to show it. Is the conditions upon which the request is based would not be generally applicable to other property within the same zoning district, not with a regular variance, which is the practical difficulties language. So we have to show that the applicant must prove that this is not something that's generally applicable in the same area. And there's a lot of buildings in Gateway that have this separation. That's the way the design is in this area, and they're not the only tenant that has multiple, what appear to be multiple units, or that could be made into multiple units. In order to create that, what is pleasant to us, what we have liked having in the Gateway area, is that variation effect to make it not look like a strip mall. I mean, we like that. That's what we've wanted in the gateway over design. And so by design, we have created this problem in Murfreesboro for tenants. It's not, because we like the way that looks. It's not an uncommon, I mean, there's no way that that's an uncommon thing. I haven't seen the other applicants, but you drive down the street, you see where this is something that people are dealing with as tenants. I just don't see how it's any different than, several other stores in our community. That's my big concern, is that, I get it. Like, I want to do whatever I want to do with anything that I'm building or designing, but when we're faced as a board with, taking care of things for the community and making sure that we apply the same rules, and I'm personally not seeing a difference here, and that may be that I need some clarification to understand what that difference is. I just don't see that personally. So that's my position. I'm on the side of the fence of saying that this really doesn't meet our standards. Even though I get the concern. I understand why. I don't know how I would fix that problem myself if I was in the Langford's position.
It was tough for me, in looking at it, if it was, the use was as it was designed as two separate tenants, one with the two windows, one with one, and they had that sign, just driving down the road, you wouldn't notice. But the applicants chose to combine the two, given what's out front there, and they have some flexibility. It's not ideal, but then the front facade of the building's not ideal. Those cars were already there. Again, that's why I'm not in favor of variance in this case. But
I don't know what direct. I think Ms. King's comments are very well spoken. So I'm not sure, based upon these regulations, how we can approve this. With that, I'm going to make a motion that we deny the request.
I'll second.
have a motion and a second to deny the request. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
No.
I believe it was 3-2 to deny.
2 to deny and 3 for.
All right, so that's majority voted to deny.
So you voted to deny?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's see. Next, we'll move to variance request, application Z17032 by Mark Hutchison, requesting a variance of 22 feet from the City of Murfreesboro zoning ordinance, Chart 2, from the minimum front yard setback requirement of 42 feet to allow the structure no closer than 20 feet from the property line fronting January Street. This is for property located in the Commercial Highway Zoning District at 107 January Street at the corner of Highway 99 and West Main Street. You'd review that for us.
Thank you. The owners are requesting a variance of 22 feet from the required setback of 42 feet, and that's because it has street frontage on 3 sides. Anywhere there's a street frontage, we do treat that as a front setback, which has a 42-foot requirement, which is pretty steep. The applicant states in his letter that the request is based on the hardship of the subject property having those 3 distinct frontages. January Street is the side that they're requesting the variance from, is a local street that ends in a cul-de-sac and currently supports just 2 properties, so it's a very limited traveled street. You can see it in the aerial view on the computer. The property is zoned highway commercial. The variance requirements, though, the practical difficulties like narrowness or shallowness or shape of the land is a finding that needs to be made. As the applicant states, the practical difficulties for this situation is that for development to go on a property this small a size, it's difficult to comply with the front setback on 3 sides. If you look on the aerial, there are other properties in this neighborhood of similar size, approximately 1 acre, but they are all interior units, so they only have one frontage to deal with. The few other parcels that do have 3 frontages are extremely large in size, so they have a lot more buildable area that they can contend with and to comply with those setbacks. The second finding is that, there are any physical features that are unusual when compared to other properties in the same zoning district. So what I just mentioned is that ones that are of similar size only have 1 frontage. The ones that have 3 frontages are much larger in size. And then the next requirement is that this would not be self-created. So in this circumstance, the owner had not subdivided the property in this manner, so it was not something that was self-created. So this concludes my presentation, and I believe the applicant is represented by Mr. Roundtree of Huddleston Steel and is here to answer any questions that the board may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for staff at this point?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I mention one more thing? In your packet, there was a plot plan or site plan that showed a potential building where it could be built. It did include a dumpster within the setback, so I just wanted to be very clear that dumpster is not part of the request and would not require a variance. If in the future they do come forward with an actual development proposal and they do need to have a dumpster in the setback, that would require a separate variance application. Okay. But they're not at that level of conceptual plans yet.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Any questions for staff? Mr. Roundtree, anything you'd like to add? All right, this time we'll conduct a public hearing. Is there anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application? If you'd come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion or a motion.
Clyde, is this where a tire shop is today, or no? Okay. It is, okay.
The January Street, I guess, dead end there, not really even through traffic, is it? Is there access? Is it next door to the tire place that's on?
It's the car lot, isn't it? Or,
So they do have access, but it's not quite through traffic.
you got the Thorntons here. Isn't that right? Yeah, Thorntons here.
Looks like the only thing that cul-de-sac
That
is
just the back.
access. Okay.
And you've got this apartment
Okay.
complex here that comes in off of it. Don't we have several precedents where we've had this same situation where we have approved variances?
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
We've had some. Yeah, we've had some front setbacks, really being a side that we have stumbled on this. I don't recall off the top of my head, but
It seems like it was not that many meetings ago that we, especially something that had a stub street similar to this, not too long. Is that what you recall?
Yes.
I feel like there was something not that long ago that we dealt with very similar to this.
I mean, I think there's definitely difficulty meeting front setbacks when you got 3 front setbacks to deal with. There's no question.
But there's no actual proposed building. This is just kind of a. This is before there's any further action taken on this lot. They want to have they want our approval so that they know how much space they have to work with.
Yeah, originally we just submitted a request for a reduced front setback with no images, and then staff asked that we kind of do some kind of projection on how that lot may lay out for clarification. That may not have any relevance really to how the actual end product site plan is determined. But we put something on that said maybe this is how it would look. So that's kind of what you're looking at right now. That's not a business or not a future business. It's just something that says
We don't know how that's going to look in that, like.
we don't. No, we just know that we'd like that to be a rear versus a front.
Just for clarification,
Our
if
side.
there is any future development that is different from this, if it's a greater variance, they would have to come back before the board again and request that. And it would be considered on the merits at that time.
Right.
Well, is the parking, the spacing, the parking, all based upon that proposed square footage of that building? Did that
Yeah.
have?
It is conceptual, but it just, it's to help illustrate that it is a buildable lot.
Yeah.
With this variance being the minimum one needed, for what they think they could sell the property for. But time will tell
Right.
if it's satisfactory or not.
And my only other question would be is if we were to grant this variance, and I know we are not talking about the dumpster right now, but I can't imagine granting the variance and then sitting there and saying that you're going to put the dumpster even closer to January Street. It would be my only thought process. Because not only are we granting a variance, but then we're now saying we're going to stick the dumpster.
Yeah, the dumpster, Ken's not really, it's not a part of it. We're not asking for a dumpster variance. We showed it on the plan just because it was a conceptual plan, but more than likely it'd have to be relocated somewhere else on that side.
As long as we had an understanding that we wouldn't be putting the dumpster in the 20 feet that's left.
Yes, sir.
As part of this application, if that makes sense.
That's understood.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make anybody else have any comments?
Well, my only question is that within this conception, is there any reason for us to believe that January Street would be expanded to go into that Thornton's, or would that consider to continue to be a stub, or would it be an access street?
I can respond to that. So that was one of the questions I had asked. So I conversed with my colleagues and management, and no, there's no intention. Possibly an intention maybe to abandon the street as a public, and it would then become a private street, and then this would be a non-issue. They wouldn't even need to come in for variance because they would comply. So
That was part of
Yeah.
what I was thinking as well, is that it wouldn't matter if.
it may end up being private in the future.
Okay. You can continue now,
All right.
Mr. Halliday.
I'll make a motion that we approve the variance with the thought process that we're not going to be putting a dumpster in that area, in the variance area.
I'll second that.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That application has been approved. Next, we'll move to special use permits. The first one is application Z17033 by Edward Odom of TNT Fireworks, requesting a special use permit to allow operation of a temporary outdoor vending establishment, which is seasonal fireworks sales in this case, in accordance with the zoning ordinance, section 9D2EEEE. The property is located in a commercial highway zoning district located at 1622 Northwest Broad Street. Just rush for you to review that for us.
Yes, thank you. So this property is the Georgetown Plaza. It's located at, as stated earlier, 1622 Northwest Broad Street, and it is zoned highway commercial, which does allow temporary sales of fireworks during the specified season. The sales would occur on June 28th through July 5th, and the hours that they would be open is 10 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, and then from 10 o'clock in the morning to midnight on only July 3rd and 4th. The staff had gone out to conduct the inspection, and we determined that it was 233 feet to the closest fire hydrant, so it does comply with the minimum 500-foot requirement in that aspect. It cannot be located within 200 feet of any fuel source. So there is a fuel source on adjacent property here, but it is only 150 feet away, so it does meet with that standard as well. And then another standard is that there's no on-site consumption of alcohol within 250 feet of the tent sales. And this one was a little bit close. It's 260 feet, and that's because they're at the furthest point away from the location where the on-site consumption would be. They originally had a closer location that was a little better logistically for them and for their parking and traffic, but because of that distance requirement, they did pull the tent further into the first row of parking in order to meet that standard. With that being said, there are conditions of approval associated with this use permit that were included in the staff report, and the applicant agrees to all of those and is present here today if you have any questions of him or of staff. Thank you very much.
Any questions for staff at this point? Anything the applicant would like to add? Mr. Odom?
Thank you for your time. I don't know if I misunderstood Ms. Rush there. The setback requirement from the fuel pumps, it sounded like that she got crossed with the fuel pumps and the alcohol consumption. We were originally in the first proposal too close to the fuel pumps and had to move the tent back to meet the setback requirement for that, which we did. I just wanted to make that clarification.
That's what it was. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Is there anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application? If you'd come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion or a motion.
If no further questions, I'll make a motion to approve the application with the recommended conditions set by the staff.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There are none. That application has been approved. Next, we'll move to application Z17034 by Kathy Biter of B&B Fireworks, requesting a special use permit to allow operation of a temporary outdoor vending establishment, also seasonal fireworks sales, within the city of Murfreesboro. This is property located in a commercial fringe zone located at 2478 New Salem Highway. You review that for us.
Yes, thank you. As indicated, the applicant is also going to be establishing temporary sales of fireworks in a tent and would like to do the sales for June 28th through July 5th of this year, and would be open for selling at 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. And for July 3rd and 4th would be open at 8 a.m. in the morning to midnight on those dates. The applicant would set up the tent on no sooner than June 21st, which is allowed by our ordinance, and then would have it removed by July 10th. This property is zoned fringe commercial, which does allow this particular use. Again, when the staff had conducted the inspection, we found that the closest fire hydrant was 203 feet away, which complies with our requirement. No fuel within 200 feet, and this was 250 feet from the closest fuel source, which is on a adjacent parcel. And no alcohol consumption within 250 feet, and that is the case. There's no alcohol nearby on this one at all. Again, there are conditions of approval, and the applicants agreed to those, and is here to answer any questions that the board may have. Thank you very much.
Any questions for staff? Anything the applicant would like to add?
Thank you for the time to speak. We appreciate being here. We've been at the same location for near 30 years, and it's sold. And we're very blessed that we have an opportunity to be back in Murfreesboro, and just thank you for the consideration. We like to sell here, and we'd appreciate your going along with that, and we will comply with anything that the city has for us to do.
Thank you. This time we'll conduct a public hearing. Is there anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application? If you'd come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for discussion or a motion.
No further questions. I'll make a motion to approve with the conditions recommended by the staff.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That application's been approved. Our last application, as mentioned earlier, has been withdrawn, and that brings us to staff reports and other business.
No, we don't have any. Thank you.
Okay. And we will adjourn.